Greetings, true believers. Matt Hall here with a video game review. This time around, it's a survival horror game called Sorry, We're Closed. The initial part of this review will be relatively spoiler-free. I'm going to cover more general impressions of the game, and I won't show much of the game beyond what appeared in its demo that was released back in October of 2023. After that, I'll get into a more spoiler-heavy, deeper analysis of the game and its story, and I'll share how my first run through the game went down. Before going forward, I'd like to thank all of our supporters over on Patreon and our channel members here. If you're interested in joining, even $1 a month goes a very long way for us, and all the support we receive is deeply appreciated. Now, let's talk about Sorry, We're Closed. Developed by the two-person team at Alamode Games, Sorry We're Closed was released through Steam on November 14th, 2024. I found out about the game in early November when I saw this trailer.
I'm not the victim, I am the system. I'm not in the wrong with my infinite wisdom. Follow my words even if I contradict them. It's my house, Michelle, I'll be the one to evict them. Don't want another demon past the ones within my mind.
While the heavily stylized visuals were intriguing, what really hooked me was the music. I love hip-hop, and it's so rare for me to find games that have any kind of original hip-hop influenced music in them. Aside from games like Parappa the Rapper or Donkey Kong 64, the only other time I've encountered this kind of thing was in El Paso Elsewhere. Shortly after seeing this trailer, I applied for a review key, which was sent over to us by Tom at Strange Signals, the same PR agency that worked with the developers of Apartment Story, which we covered in a previous video. Over the course of about a week, I spent 8 hours playing through this game, and immediately after finishing it, I came down with the flu, lost my voice, and I had to wait almost 3 weeks to record this review. So this is classic survival horror, with fixed cameras, limited resources, and a lot of the other tropes that you've come to expect from the genre. James Stephanie Sterling of the Jimquisition covered the Sorry We're Closed demo last year, saying that it was basically an incredibly gay Silent Hill. And yeah, that does describe the game pretty accurately, at least to a degree. While the game is undeniably gay and was clearly influenced by Silent Hill, there's a lot more going on here. The combat system is very reminiscent of one of my favorite games, Killer 7. Beyond that, the game has a surprisingly rich world full of complex characters, each with their own motivations and conflicts, and decisions that you make throughout the game will affect their paths as much as your own. You play as Michelle, a convenience store clerk who has gotten herself mixed up with the demon realm. After an encounter with a particularly menacing demonic entity, Michelle's third eye is opened, and she's able to see things that other humans can't. In the game, this third eye ability works as a radius effect, allowing you to see a supernatural world that blends with Michelle's reality. You activate your third eye by snapping your fingers, and you can snap back at any time. Under normal circumstances, Michelle can run, but when her third eye is active, she can only walk. Enemies that are in the range of her third eye sight have their hearts exposed, which are weak points on the enemies, very similar to the weak points on the enemies in Killer 7. You have to be fairly close to an enemy to see its weak point, but thankfully, activating your third eye when an enemy is within range will briefly stun them. Raising your weapon puts you in a first-person view where you line up your attack. Much like in Killer 7 or the original Resident Evil 4, you're unable to move while aiming. Speed and accuracy are rewarded when confronting enemies, and to me, the combat feels great with a gamepad or keyboard and mouse. You can run away if you need to get some distance between you and an enemy, but doing so will close your third eye. This system lends itself to a lot of really engaging combat scenarios, and your third eye vision is also regularly implemented in puzzles, navigation, and NPC interactions. Having this third eye vision act only as a radius around the player is a unique twist on the sort of environment scanning mechanic that seems really prevalent in a lot of modern games, or at least games from the last 12 years or so. The fact that you can only walk while it's active really helps to dictate the pacing of the game, making some areas of the game feel meticulously slow, while at other times the player is forced to move as quickly as possible. All throughout the game, you'll be encountering puzzles, enemies, and obstacles that present unique opportunities to engage with this third eye mechanic. I was really impressed with how fresh everything was able to feel in this regard through the entire campaign. Like all of the best survival horror games, Sorry We're Closed is short enough that with enough experience, it can comfortably be completed in a single session. At the end of each chapter, the game ranks your performance, giving players a clear rundown of what they accomplished, and what they may have missed. The game also has a variety of side quests and decisions to make that will shape the way the story resolves. There are 4 available endings to the game, and experimenting with different paths will definitely give invested gamers more reason to replay. I don't want to go too deep into the story just yet, but I will say that I think the writing in Sorry We're Closed is really strong. You'll meet a lot of different characters, and even the most minor characters are given distinct personalities. These characters feel very real, and their desires and struggles work to illustrate, echo, iterate, and expand on various themes of the game. Between each level, you're given time to go around and talk to various NPCs in the game, and I really feel like there are no wasted words in these exchanges. The writing is very lean, with every line offering something that will widen your perspective and understanding of the story. This efficiency in the writing doesn't sacrifice style at all, with each character really having a distinct voice. I found myself invested pretty much equally in every side story that I came across, which is a really rare thing for me. While the game tackles plenty of heady topics, it also has a fair amount of humor, and I think that it maintains a strong balance between its more serious and lighthearted moments. The other aspect of the writing that really impressed me is harder to articulate. I mentioned that this is a very gay game, but what does that even mean? There isn't just one type of gay art, but there is a certain type of gay art that I'm personally more attracted to, maybe a more extreme type of art. Films from people like Gregg Araki, drawings from people like Tom of Finland, controversial or even banned media like the original music video for Sex Dwarf by Soft Cell. That's the kind of gay art that I think Sorry We're Closed has more in common with than some other more mainstream examples of gay art. The game taps into a particular type of horror, a romantic and sometimes sexual type of horror that feels very reminiscent of Clive Barker, another one of my favorite gay artists. In recent years, mainstream American media has become much more open to authentically representing queer themes and identities, but even so, a lot of what comes out is very tame, or even sanitized to a degree. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but it feels like mainstream audiences, or maybe just the mainstream media gatekeepers, aren't quite ready to engage with extreme art that is also overtly gay. Clearly, modern audiences are open to extreme art. The recent mainstream success of Terrifier 3 is a great example of this. But would a gay version of that same film be as successful? I would assume not, at least not right now. Mainstream audiences tend to be presented with a very limited perspective on queer culture, and certain avenues of that culture just aren't regularly explored in popular media. It's become more commonplace now to see something like a drag performance in mainstream media, but it's still relatively uncommon to see a depiction of something like a sweaty leather bar. Between its depictions of violence and character wardrobes, clearly inspired by fetish gear, Sorry We're Closed definitely goes to some extreme places, but it never feels overindulgent or like it's making a big show out of trying to be taboo. The more extreme characters live right alongside some of the more tame characters, illustrating a wide spectrum of personalities, interests, and identities. The game is unapologetically queer, but in my opinion, it doesn't just use queer as a genre tag like some other games do. There's an unintentional tokenization that can happen in some games where authentic representation of queer characters is eclipsed by developers, publishers, or whoever going out of their way to appear politically correct and as inclusive as possible in a sort of HR department way rather than a queer people exist kind of way. I'm not sure if I'm really making any sense here, but there's often a certain sort of careful curation going on when queer art and media is presented to the general public, which leads a lot of straight people to only ever encounter a very narrow selection of queer media. I get why that is, but I still find it frustrating, which is why I'm always excited when something like Sorry We're Closed comes along that I think has the potential to present a queer perspective to a general audience in a way that they might not be used to seeing. I feel like I should say that the culture has come a long way. I still remember back in 2005 when you couldn't go an hour without hearing a Brokeback Mountain joke, with the punchline being, "These guys are gay." Still, even though things have come a long way since then, there's still a very long way to go. Anyway, this game discusses topics like love, suffering, sacrifice, identity, religion, sex, and death in a way that I just don't see coming from a lot of straight writers, even when those writers hire consultants to make sure that they're being inclusive. So yes, this is a gay game, but I don't think that it was built for an exclusively gay audience. The game is telling a powerful story on its own terms, and I think that any fan of survival horror and philosophically deep narratives will find a lot to like about it. The game has a sort of punk rock edge to it. The stylized graphics are reminiscent of games like the aforementioned Killer 7 and Jet Set Radio. The music is an eclectic and often unconventional mix, with several pieces produced by Okamura featuring lyrics that reflect on the story. While having vocals or lyrics in a video game isn't necessarily uncommon, it's not as common to have those songs played during enemy encounters, and it's even less common for those songs to be hip-hop tracks. The energy of those tracks work to make some of the boss battles feel especially intense. So much about the overall presentation makes the game feel both fresh and nostalgic at the same time. The fixed camera angles definitely recall classic survival horror games, but the camera placement is much more dynamic and varied than many of those older titles. There's a lot of classic video gamey stuff here, like breaking open boxes, or trading items for currency that is then used to upgrade your weapons and abilities. There are some puzzles in the game that I won't show just yet, but they utilize a top-down view that gives them a very particular old-school flavor, kind of like certain sections of games like Super Mario Odyssey or Nier Automata that change perspective to give the gameplay a different feel. Despite being labeled a survival horror game, I personally didn't find the game to be all that scary, at least not in an obvious way. The game definitely has a strong, foreboding atmosphere at times, but it never really relies on jump scares. The horror in this game is more of a slow, existential type of horror, something that only reveals its true depth if you look at it for long enough. There is plenty of Silent Hill-inspired industrial grime, and plenty of gore, but in a way, the game is about coming to terms with those things and immersing yourself in them rather than running away from them, which gives this game's brand of horror a unique feel. Ultimately, I don't have anything negative to say about Sorry We're Closed. I had some frustration with some of the boss battles, one in particular, but that's really more of a skill issue than a design issue, in my opinion. If the game is a bit too difficult for you, there are several difficulty modifiers in the game's accessibility options, and those can be turned on or off at any time. While the game definitely makes you think to solve puzzles, at no point was I ever feeling confused or lost in a way that halted progress, and I also never ran into any bugs or performance issues. The game ran great on my PC, and it launched with Steam Deck compatibility in mind. If this review has you intrigued but you're still not ready to commit, there is a free demo available on Steam and itch that features an abbreviated version of the game's opening and first level. So that's my review. I definitely recommend the game. From this point forward, we're going to go into spoilers, so I would recommend playing the game before watching this portion of the video. I'm going to recap my experience with the campaign and discuss some of the choices I made. In my view, Sorry We're Closed is a game about transformation through love and loss. In the world of Sorry We're Closed, there was a time when there were only angels and there were no demons. At some point in history, some of the angels wanted more, and their insubordination caused them to be exiled from heaven. Being separated from God's love and their former home drove these angels to become demons. Their hearts transformed as they went deeper and deeper into darkness. That was a very long time ago, and the years or centuries that have passed since then have allowed for a sort of hierarchy and society to form in the demon realm. One especially powerful demon, referred to as the Duchess, is on a quest to return to their previous angelic form, and they believe that they can do this through love. The Duchess seeks out humans who have the potential to give them the love that they believe they need to achieve this transformation. The Duchess brands these potential lovers with a cut on their forehead, revealing a third eye that allows them to see and interact with the plane of existence that angels and demons exist on. However, the Duchess has never successfully persuaded a human to love them. Instead, these humans go mad and transform into sorts of demons themselves. Some of these potential lovers are subjected to perpetual torture by the Duchess, while others are simply disposed of entirely. Our protagonist, Michelle, recently broke up with her girlfriend Leslie, who portrays a character named Epiphany Oxblood on a popular television show called Dying Petals. Michelle's broken heart and lonely energy has attracted the attention of the Duchess, who opens Michelle's third eye and gives her 3 days to come to a decision. Will Michelle love the Duchess or reject the Duchess and suffer eternal torture? This ultimatum comes in the form of a curse, and it turns out that Michelle has a possibility of challenging the curse and freeing herself from the Duchess, but in order to do so, she'll need to collect the third eyes of 3 of the Duchess's previous victims. This premise lays out the basic flow of the game. There are 3 main stages, each one is a sort of dungeon that sees Michelle tracking visions of other potential lovers who had been cursed by the Duchess. For me, this brought to mind the murder scenes and overlaps of Alan Wake 2, with each new stage bringing Michelle closer to her fate. Michelle follows these visions, viewing each victim's descent into madness and their eventual transformation. Each stage culminates in a boss battle with the transformed victim, and Michelle eventually collects all 3 eyes, which combined with her own gives her enough power to potentially defeat the Duchess. However, these stages are just one half of the game. Between each stage, Michelle can walk through the streets of her city, visiting friends and checking out local shops. It turns out that this region has a particularly high level of demon activity, And some people who Michelle thought were human turned out to actually be demons or angels in disguise. You'll meet many different characters throughout the game. Some are lovers who are having relationship troubles, and you can get involved in their lives. Others are opportunists seeking to fill the position that would be open should you be able to defeat and banish the Duchess. Characters will ask you to make alliances or agreements, and it's up to you to decide how to proceed. You can't go along with everything. You'll have to play through the game multiple times if you want to see how different choices affect your experience. For me, this was a very powerful aspect of the game. Choices actually mattered and had an impact on the story, the characters, and how I would interact with the world around me. To save your game, you use a telephone. A mysterious operator is on the other end of the line, and you can chat with this person. They seem to know quite a bit about you and everyone around you. These little chats really reminded me of talking to your father on the phone in Earthbound, and it was something that I looked forward to doing all the way through the game. Eventually, the operator reveals themselves as Lucy, a person who you thought was just a normal human. Lucy is one of those individuals looking to usurp the Duchess. She offers you a deal, and if you align yourself with her, she promises to reunite you with your ex. She makes the offer several times before rescinding it. Personally, I was intrigued by the offer, but I waited too long to accept it. Rather than trying to load an old save, I pushed forward, accepting my decision. For the rest of the game, Lucy became increasingly hostile toward me, eventually rooting for my demise. At another point in the game, you'll meet an angel who is in love with a demon. If angels and demons spend too much time with one another, their powers will begin to fade, and they'll eventually become human, losing all memory of what they were before. This angel isn't sure if they should continue the relationship or not, and they'll seek your advice. I tried to help this couple and agreed to deliver a letter on the angel's behalf. Unfortunately, I forgot to drop the letter off with the courier. This was another time where I was tempted to reload my save, but again, I decided to accept the consequences of my actions. The game is full of interactions like this, opportunities for you to go one way or another, to not only agree to certain terms or actions, but to then be responsible for following through on those agreements. It's a level of agency that I haven't really ever seen in a survival horror game before, and it adds a very rich element to the experience. This agency extends itself to how you deal with the Duchess. Do you submit? Do you fight back? Can you love a demon? How does their definition of love line up with your own? Love is a powerful thing. The more that you love someone, the more you set yourself up for potential heartbreak if you lose that love. The greater the joy, the greater the potential for suffering. This is a concept that the game examines from many different perspectives through its human and non-human characters. I attempted to love the Duchess, but they met my advances with skepticism and frustration. They didn't want love by my definition, they wanted their own vision of love, a love built on total obedience and subjugation. Ultimately, I wound up challenging the Duchess's curse, and engaged in battle with them. I'm not sure if this battle could have been avoided, but much to my surprise, the game ended with the Duchess later appearing in human form. Successfully challenging the Duchess's curse diminished their power, dissolving their demon form and making them human. Michelle remembered everything, but the Duchess seemingly only had the faintest impression that they may have had a previous encounter. The game didn't expound on what happened next, but it hinted at the possibility of the two winding up together. From what I've been told, the game has 4 possible endings. I have no idea what the other endings are or how to achieve them. I've been looking online to see if anyone uploaded a complete run of the game, but at the time of writing, I hadn't yet found any. Did I get the good ending? Are they all good endings? I look forward to seeing more people play through this game and finding out how they choose to navigate its many choices. I feel that the game does a great job at examining love, loss, and change without ever really feeling hokey or overly sentimental. It's a very real, raw look at how relationships can go, which isn't something I expected to get out of a survival horror game. I'm really barely scratching the surface of what this game contains, but I don't think it's fair to try and make a totally comprehensive video on a game like this, at least not yet. This is the kind of game that people should experience for themselves, and not try to glean an understanding of through a second-hand view or analysis. If you've made it this far and haven't played the game, I would implore you to go give it a shot. There is a lot that I didn't show here, and a lot to discover for yourself. If you have played the game, please leave a comment and share some of your thoughts on it with me. Or check out the Hidden Machine Discord and we can chat about it there. There's so much more I could say about the game, but I'll leave that for another time. Until then, see ya.